Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sterling Live. My name is Caitlin Brower. I'm Sterling's social media manager, also your host for Sterling Live. I'm so excited to have two of my favorite guests back with me today. They are repeat Sterling Live guests, and I'm so excited to have both of them back. As you can see, they are right up here. We do have Steve Smith, President International, and Taylor Liggett, Head of Identity, here with us today. And as you can see on the bottom of the screen, this is our topic. We're talking about speed, accuracy, and strength, the impact of digital identity on hiring. I'm so excited. Digital identity is such a hot topic right now. We're going to dive into it from an international focus. I'm excited to get some insights there. Before we get into it, though, I'd love for Taylor and Steve to introduce themselves to our audience. So Taylor, I'll start with you. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin, for having me back. Real pleasure to be on with you and Steve this morning. So my name is Taylor Liggett. I head up identity at Sterling. So basically everything that has to do with identity verification or biometrics, digital wallet, et cetera, that falls into my area.
Happy to be on. Yeah, thanks for coming back. And Steve, it's been a little while since you've been on, but I am happy to have you back. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Steve Smith. Based in the UK, I am president of International here at Sterling. So looking after our international businesses, business teams and customers all over EMEA and APAC.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining me. If you are tuning in live across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, I want to remind you, if you do have questions for Taylor and Steve throughout the episode, please go ahead and put them in the comment section across all three of these platforms, and I'll get the questions over to them as I see fit throughout the show. Let's dive into it because I got a ton of questions for the two of you, and I'm really excited to, get this started. So my first question, Steve, is for you. So what is digital identity and why, we chose a specific title for this episode. So why did we go in that direction?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so digital identity, keeping it simple, I guess, is it's the trusted digital alternative to physical ID verifications, right? So whereas in the past, we might have always checked a passport or a national ID or looked at a document. Through the COVID years, we saw those well-established but kind of out-of-date in-person processes get super relaxed. And so that created an opportunity to redefine and rethink. And the digital identity revolution, that's happening as a result. It's happening in countries all around the world. And countries are starting to establish these digital identity trust frameworks that govern how we do identity in a digital way. And I think it's actually an accelerator for broader systemic change through the adoption of digital technologies that ultimately create faster hiring, higher quality candidate experiences, and stronger, more robust background screening and identity services as well. And I think that's where the title comes from, honestly, Caitlin. It's that kind of speed, accuracy, strength, all relating to kind of the experiences of hiring and getting hired. I think the immediate and the long-term opportunities to revolutionize the way that we apply and get hired into work are just enormous off the back of this.
Yeah, and the word revolutionize kind of brings me into my next question, for Taylor, kind of talking about, how has digital identity developed in the recent years or revolutionized?
Yeah, I mean, look, digital identity has come a long way in recent years, and I think Steve hit some of the points. I mean, there's been all these kind of unique drivers that have come both from the side of business, the side of government, but also consumers, right? Like individuals have become much more aware of their data, their ownership of their own data, their own identity, how that's shared. And, constantly the world has changed dramatically in terms of just digital access. I mean, just the days of it even being practical of showing an ID or what have you are really gone. Mm-hmm. And so, this needing to have an easy, secure, trusted way of proving that you are who you say you are, and relying parties, governments, employers, et cetera, being able to accept that. That's been a huge evolution over the last couple of years. And the big piece that I think has come with that Sterling's been particularly focused on, that's a big part of our overall vision, has been not just digital identity, but reusable identity, right? So the concept of having to go through the process really just one time, ideally, having that be part of a trusted digital identity network that can then be reused, the next time you get a job or the next time you go for government benefits or whatever they prove your age, whatever the sort of circumstance is. I think that's been a major development that has happened over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. So diving into our services a little bit more, Steve, what does Sterling's current identity service look like?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like many others in the screening industry, we've had identity as a component part of a background check for a really long time, especially internationally, right? Where often a background check has been, a identity check has been a prerequisite to other searches like criminal records or right to work. And so often we will have used like document verification methods, and they would take place behind the scenes of the background check in order to get those requirements done. Sterling got accredited as an identity service provider in the UK just a couple of years ago, when the trust framework was set up. And that created an opportunity for us to bring a digital identity solution into the experiences for candidates, really bring it kind of into the forefront of the background check. And then right now we're actually launching version 2 of that, which it's super exciting. What it does is it puts identity right at the start of our workflow. So it's identity first in everything that we do. It absolutely does that reusable thing that Taylor was just talking about. But it also achieves one of our strategic goals here at Sterling about seamless workflows. Like, we believe that candidates should just be able to move through a workflow. And when you think about reusable and seamless, it kind of feels hard because you've got to go away to make something kind of reusable. But actually, what we've developed with our friends in partnership with Yoti is actually something super cool that enables reusable through a seamless workflow. So that works for digital identity in the way that we've already talked about it. But the product also talks directly to the associated screening products, things like right to work and a DBS check in the UK, for example. And the early results are just amazing, actually amazing, like right to work checks in minutes, and just the most fantastic experiences for clients and candidates. So super excited about it, really, really happy with the partnership and also all the opportunities that lie ahead in terms of keeping the iterations of this product and service going, really.
That is exciting, and I'm happy that you were able to share a little bit more information on that, with our audience today. So, that was like looking at it from like an international lens, specifically in the UK, things like that. Taylor, how does our digital identity service work outside of the UK?
Yeah, so a lot of the same things Steve just talked about will apply. I mean, we've sort of had the central premise of, we want identity first workflows across the board, right? So that's been there's been some regions and some markets that have been ahead of others. Frankly, UK has been a leader in this. There's other, Canada, Australia, a few others that have done so as well. But by and large, there's huge space to make sure that identity is sort of implemented in front of a check. So we've been very focused on that. Steve mentioned the partnership with Yoti. We're incredibly excited to expand beyond UK to a number of other markets around the world with our global ID service, embracing a lot of the same principles Steve just said around reusable ID, frictionless upfront identity verification. And a lot of this was built off of a vision that we did actually in the US, which is like the farthest behind in terms of identity verification. And so we've worked in that case with ID.me. We developed a great sort of identity first workflow that could be implemented in the US that's based similarly around reusable identity. We've seen incredible results based off that. So between what we're doing there, the Yoti development that we worked in the UK and broadly throughout sort of our global reach of Sterling clients, that's really what we're pulling together, is a single upfront identity first workflow based on reusable identity that represents a great value for both our clients as well as candidates that are going through the experience.
So with starting in the US, this could be a question for the two of you. Did you find any learnings as we partnered with ID.me, as we moved into our partnership with Yoti?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Certainly on my side. I mean, the US was a great way to pressure test what we were doing. You know, a market that really this hadn't been done before, at least done at scale before. There was a real need to have you know, multiple pathways for candidates to get through. There was a real need to ensure there wasn't a lot of drop off with candidates up front. So there was a lot of great learnings that we had. And you know, one of the reasons we really like our partners at Yoti is because they came to the table with us and really worked collaboratively to create something that was an exceptional experience that brought from our learnings, as well as the many sort of learnings that they have as well within being experts within this space.
Yeah, it was totally a meeting of the minds, wasn't it, Taylor? I remember when we were together with the team at Yoti in London, and it was just like, we are talking the same language. I think that was one of the learnings, right? Is that actually the partnership with ID.me in the US was so strong. We were like, how are we going to find something equivalent outside of the US, and how are we going to do this thing? And actually, the team at Yoti was super impressive in all the areas that we were interested in and looking at. So, yeah, strong partnerships is really key to this.
Yes.
Yeah, I love the story. It is really powerful too for Sterling's global footprint. Kind of, you know, here's what we did over here, taking our learnings and moving that and being able to provide, like you said, Steve, finding a partner, being able to provide for our clients all around the world. So extremely powerful story. I have another question for the two of you. So Steve, I'll start with you and then we can kick it over to Taylor. Let's talk about compliance and meeting local regulations like around EMEA, APAC, and the Americas. Like, how does that all come into play? And I know that both of you love talking about compliance, so I had to throw that in there.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know how much I love talking about compliance. Yeah, so well, I think as boring as compliance might be, like it's really actually really important in this context as well, because there's so much that's evolving and emerging. Like as Taylor's already talked about, I think the compliance landscape around identity and digital identity is constantly changing. So really having a good grasp on that is critical for anyone looking to kind of partner with someone around identity services. And I think at first glance, it looks really complex, but the landscape is actually streamlining with a lot of this evolution that's happening. And that's good because it creates opportunities to kind of be consistent or similar in that evolving landscape. I think that the ability to deliver digital identity at scale is the first thing everyone looks at. That's what we looked at. But then also you need to think about the ability to nuance for local markets, right? Because the compliance landscape looks different in these different local markets. The regulations are different. And so being able to kind of pick a thing to like hang everything on, but then also just be able to partner well to kind of nuance that. And like I think Europe is a really good example of that. So there's digital identity guidance in Europe that's well adopted, but different countries are choosing to interpret it slightly different ways. And so what that means is that there are kind of patchwork limitations as you look at European countries. In some countries, you can capture all the data points on an ID. In some, you can't, and you have to limit that. In some, you can store those identity attributes. In others, you can't. You have to delete them almost immediately. And in some, you can do identity checks if someone is moving into a certain role. In other countries, you can only do an identity check once they're an employee rather than before they're an employee, right? So I think understanding that is really important. And then being able to kind of nuance the solution to cater for those differences, that's what really will lead to success as kind of things scale. And like as it's emerging, I think it's just about understanding how different markets are maturing and going where the opportunity is first, and then like recognizing that phased opportunity. And I long for the day when there's this interoperable thing that happens, where you can share an ID from one place into another, and that would be a beautiful thing. And like we're starting to see different countries move towards it. I mean, I can give some examples from my regions where like there's obviously the trust framework in the UK. There's the trusted digital identity framework that's coming through now in Australia. Singapore has an amazing kind of landscape ecosystem around identity and portable attributes and reusable attributes. The Sing Pass is really best in class for that. India is going through a really aggressive process of kind of taking what was very manual processes around ID and moving them to digital. So kind of all at different stages, but opportunity in every market. I know that's the same kind of further afield too, right, Taylor?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you hit all the high notes here, but in some, it's a really exciting piece because this is something that different countries are taking slightly different approaches to. Some are certainly farther ahead than others. There's a lot of sort of shared principles around importance of privacy of data, how data moves, what type of user rights come with that. There is in some cases different sort of policy elements that can lend themselves to different types of identity verification that go into different. So, for example, like in the US, there's a sort of identity assurance level framework, right? So that many in the sort of government and private industry will say, okay, for this position, you need to have an IL2 verification or whatever the case may be, right? So, really exciting time, and I think there's in one sense a lot of there can be a lot of nuance, a lot of complication to this, but another reason why I think for employers out there that are working with a trusted partner that can help kind of navigate all of this on their behalf and in partnership with them, sort of talk through the differences in the different markets, things to pay attention to. That's really where you'll want to be.
Of course. Yeah. Finding that partner is definitely critical to success here. So we'll move away from compliance. I know you guys are done talking about it, but Steve, this might spark your interest a little bit more talking about the candidate experience. So can you talk about this experience that's being delivered and what it means for both applicants and employers?
Yeah, sure. So we kind of touched on it at the start, right? That doing digital identity really well creates opportunities for much faster hiring, much more accuracy through the process, and just like a much better experience. I think there is a risk, right? As there is with everything. Whereas before, like if you were required to do an identity process, you might be required to go somewhere and show someone something, and that was like a real drain. Digital identity is much, much better, right? But there's still this cycle of, it feels sometimes like you're constantly going through a transactional identity process, which kind of sucks. I don't know if anyone else has felt it, but it's like you sign up for a bank account, you go through an identity process. You sign up for like some other website, you go through an identity process. Like they just seem to be happening all the time, and every company is like embracing digital identity, but it often means you're kind of going over and over and over. So I think the biggest differentiator for us is, I know we touched on it earlier, but it's that identity first, seamless workflow that enables reusable identity. Because once you've got a reusable ID, you can just share it. Rather than keep going through that same thing again. And I think that's the beauty of it. When someone comes back into a Sterling workflow, being able to kind of skip that whole identity process, that is beautiful. And to do it first time in a really simple, streamlined way, that's what we're really, really excited about. And like talking about that today in the UK, but like tomorrow as our global identity product comes out, exactly the same features and functionality all over the world. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, I think on this one, I mean, candidate experience is always of paramount importance, but I think when you're talking about identity, it's even more sort of front and center and has to be structured correctly because ultimately you're asking the candidate to take very sort of specific steps here and go through something. And you're also, asking them to provide personal information. There has to be a real strong sense of trust and security with the candidate, but also minimizing friction as much as possible, right? And I think that the more that candidate experience can be fine-tuned, we think we've done, based on all our learnings, we think we've done a great job sort of putting that in place. But the more that I think candidates can understand, kind of to Steve's point, the reusable identity aspect, I go through this once, I only have to do it this once. And then there's application, not just with Sterling, but beyond that, right? I think is really, really going to help shape the way that candidates come into this and go through the workflow.
Yeah, I think the other thing that just actually as you're talking, Taylor, it made me think like there's a lot of information that gets handed over when you're doing a background check, and like that's the same with identity, and having to do that so many times actually creates risk for a lot of people. Like identity fraud is on the rise, and there are new ways of doing that, and so actually being able to provide the candidates moving through a Sterling experience with a reusable gives them control of their own data as well, which is in this day and age, it's really, really important. So those kind of privacy preserving principles a front and center in the candidate experience that we provide as well.
Yeah, one of the things I think for people, for candidates, for kind of individuals to think about when you're going through an identity process is that there are some, Steve talked about privacy preserving principles. I mean, you should only be sharing the information relevant to the transaction you're going through, right? So whatever information is needed for that, that's all you should be sharing. And your experience should be really crystal clear about what you're sharing and with whom, right? I think those are the things that need to be incorporated, giving the user control and making sure it's really clear on only sharing the necessary information and exactly who it's being shared with and what purpose and so on. We've really tried to construct things around those principles.
Yeah, a lot of great information there. I think, something that really stood out to me from, both of your conversations right there is that, you think of digital identity and you think of, trying to verify everything, as a consumer, you're like, yes, of course, like companies are trying to be more safe and it's good for me. But Steve, you had mentioned, having to do it multiple times actually does pose that risk. So it's not just, providing a seamless experience for a consumer, it's actually helping them from a safety standpoint as well. So really, really interesting to think about on that lens, because I don't think I was ever thinking of it like that. So. All right. One final question. We'll obviously see if anything comes.
May have lost Caitlin, but Steve, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I got you. Oh, I think she's coming back. She's emerging.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Great.
Here. Okay, we can hear you now.
A few identities. So maybe.
Okay, you're still a bit clunky there, actually, Caitlin. So Taylor, I think Caitlin's asking, what's the future? What's the future look like for digital identity? And she'll come back and join us for the answer, I'm sure.
Yes, thank you. I can roll with what is the future of digital identity. So, I mean, look, Steve, you and I have talked about this a lot, obviously, and it's a particular area that I'm very passionate about. But I think everything we've talked about will continue to accelerate around the critical importance of reusable identity, digital identity more broadly. I think all of those things will continue to accelerate. To me, what the big sort of future changes, at least relevant to the use cases we're talking about, and more broadly, is beyond just the control of one's identity. There are many other aspects that can come into play here. So if you think about what Sterling does and around what many employers need, it's not just verification of identity, but also verification potentially of like a degree or a work history or certain credentials or sort of whatever the various attributes are that's being verified. And as we move forward, conducting those types of verifications and giving the individual, the candidate, the user, the ability to control those credentials, have them move with the person, will be a real sort of game-changing experience. When we think about digital wallets and we think about trusted identity networks, we should really look at it through that lens. If you look at your own physical wallet, the ID card is in there, but there are other things that are in there as well, right? And digital wallets take that just to another level. So as we move forward, there will be space to have essentially almost pre-verified candidates come into play, right? So people that are coming right into the workflow and right up front sharing their identity information, maybe sharing their degree, maybe sharing their previous work history, maybe sharing certain credentials. There's myriad different opportunities for how this gets approached. And I think the world of portable credentials, portable verified credentials, moving with reusable identity is really what the future looks like to me, and sort of an exciting way that Sterling has been working to design our services and our overall vision on identity. I'm not sure, Steve, if you would agree with that or add anything to that.
Yeah, I know, I totally agree. I think it's absolutely the future, and it's so cool to think about how like digital identity then kind of grows into this reusable thing, and then that creates all these other opportunities downstream. And you mentioned physical wallets. I don't even think I've got a physical wallet anymore. I think it might be upstairs in a drawer by my bed or something. I can never find it. Don't need it anymore. It's on my watch. It's on my phone, right? So that's the way that we're all operating now anyway. So why not get our career credentials kind of built in? I think it's super exciting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It seems to be an exciting future ahead for sure. I do know we did get a question on LinkedIn about, kind of like future expansion plans and things like that. But I think you guys did touch on what the future looks like. So we could definitely see Sterling as a part of this future for digital identity, of course. So at this time, if you do have any other questions on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, please go ahead and put them in the comment section. As we wait for any final questions to come in, I want to get final thoughts from the two of you. This has been an outstanding conversation today. So Steve, I'll start with you on final thoughts.
Yeah, I know. So I think a helpful reflection is that, like, we've thought about how the last couple of years have been this enabler for change and growth and all of that. And I think what it's done is introduce new ways of working all around the world. Not to go back into compliance, it's a bit different to compliance because I hate that, right? But with new ways of working creates new opportunities for fraud. And I think when we're thinking about identity, we have to be considering, well, okay, what are the ways that this could be abused? And how do we mitigate fraud in the solutions that we're providing as well? What are the new types of fraud? How does AI play into this? Like, what about remote working when people are employing and kind of collaborating with people that maybe they've never ever met before, and you're granting access, like in the gig economy, onto networks to provide services in offices physically, like in and out, and remote hybrid working, those sorts of things. Like, identity actually comes even more into the forefront when we think of it like that, because being able to, like where we say identity first, that creates a unique fraud mitigation opportunity that actually the rest of the background check doesn't get to happen if you can't actually establish who you are. And establishing who you are is the first port of call. So I think for anyone that's kind of listening today and thinking, well, I get it, like, it's nice, it's shiny, can do all this fun stuff in the future, like, it's actually really, really, it's an imperative today to have a solution like this, to be able to protect against the new kinds of fraud that are coming through thick and fast, honestly.
Yeah. And just real quick, the audience on LinkedIn right now, there's actually 2 assets within the comment feed. So Steve just said how important it was. We did just release a press release this week for the US with ID.me. There's some critical stats in there of what we've been able to uncover with clients. So please look at that, because the importance is real for sure. You can kind of see that firsthand, what we've been able to uncover. And then also just to go into the Yoti partnership, there's more information in the comment section on LinkedIn as well. We'll have more to come there, but thank you, Steve, for signing us off with that. Taylor, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, honestly very similar to Steve. I mean, we spent a lot of this talking about sort of a lot of the positive aspects of the experience we put together around reusable identity, around all that good stuff. I think there's a very important point to not be lost around the very real risk of fraud that's happening right now. We have seen a staggering, to me, honestly, shocking amount of fraud. When we came into this, we knew we'd get better screening results because the information was verified up front. We were surprised how significant that was. At least in the US, it was 45% was the average we saw. But then also just this sort of outright fraudulent behavior that we were seeing, fake IDs and people misrepresenting their information, and one person interviewing another person showing up at work. This stuff is happening much more, and as we are more and more remote work, the rise of AI is going to be a complete game changer, right? When you look at real-time deep fakes and the incredible ability to produce fake documents, the need for this is really significant. And I think some employers, particularly those who have been bit by identity fraud, are much more attuned to this. But don't wait until that happens. It's a real black eye. It's a real messy situation that can occur. Make sure you have in place the right tools to mitigate that. And I think that's the final thought I'd leave with.
And it's a great final thought. Don't wait. We're going to end this show now and then just go and figure it out. Don't wait. I think it really is. You don't want to be put in that situation. Like, Sterling, clearly today, from what the two of you said, we are here to help, and we can get ahead of that for sure. So Steve, Taylor, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you again today. There are no further comments at this time. If anything comes through after, we will follow up with anyone. So I want to say thank you to the both of you for being on Sterling Live with me again. I want to thank our audience for tuning in live, or if you're watching on demand. But with that being said, Taylor, Steve, thank you so much. And I'll catch everyone on the next episode.
Great.
Thanks, Caitlin.
See ya.